The first recording was never meant to be heard. It was discovered months later, buried on a forgotten cassette labeled only with a date that had not yet come. When it was finally played, the voices inside described a crime in precise, chilling detail, a crime that, at that time, had not happened. According to archived police reports and witness testimony, the case began in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The tenant was a quiet man named Imran Qureshi. He worked night shifts repairing electrical equipment and rarely spoke to his neighbors. Nothing about him stood out, except for one thing. He collected old radios. They filled every corner of his apartment. Large wooden cabinets with cracked varnish. Portable sets with broken antennas. Dust-covered receivers from decades past, each one carefully restored and wired into a tangled system that only he seemed to understand. Witnesses later reported that he spent hours each night tuning them. Not to music, not to news, just static. Imran once told a colleague that static wasn't empty. He said it was full of things that never made it through. No one asked what he meant. The radio that changed everything arrived in early November. According to his purchase records, it came from a rural estate sale several hundred miles away. The listing was vague. No brand name. No clear image. Just a description. Old shortwave unit. Not working. Sold as is. Imran paid more than it was worth. When the package arrived, the delivery man noted its unusual weight. The casing was made of thick, dark wood, warped with age. The front panel held a cracked glass dial with faded markings in a language Imran did not recognize. The knobs were stiff, almost fused in place, as if they had not been turned in decades. Inside, the wiring was wrong. That was the first thing Imran wrote in his notebook. The circuits didn't follow any standard layout. Components were arranged in ways that made no sense, as if assembled without regard for function. Some parts appeared newer than others, suggesting it had been altered repeatedly over time. Still, he believed he could fix it. For 3 nights, he worked without sleep. He replaced corroded connections, rewired the power supply, and carefully cleaned each internal contact. By the 4th night, the radio powered on. But it did not behave like a normal device. There was no clear frequency range. The dial turned endlessly without resistance, yet the needle barely moved. When he adjusted the volume, the sound did not simply grow louder or quieter. It changed. At low levels, it produced a faint hum, like distant wind passing through a narrow space. At higher levels, the static became layered, almost textured, as if multiple signals were overlapping in ways that should not have been possible. Imran recorded everything. He had a habit of documenting unusual signals, saving them on old cassette tapes labeled with dates and times. At first, the recordings from the new radio seemed unremarkable. Just static. Occasional bursts of interference. Then, on the 6th night, something shifted. At approximately 2:13 a.m., the static broke. The recording captured a voice. Faint. Distorted. But unmistakably human. At first, Imran thought it was a fragment of a broadcast, something caught between frequencies. But the voice didn't speak like a transmission. There was no structure. No introduction. No background noise consistent with radio programming. It sounded immediate. Breathing could be heard. Uneven, panicked. Then a whisper. Don't open the door. Imran replayed the segment multiple times. The words were clear. Too clear. He checked every possible source of interference. No nearby stations matched the frequency. No recorded broadcasts contained those words. He noted something else. The timestamp on the tape. It was labeled automatically by his recording system, synced to his computer clock. The time read 2:13 a.m., November 17th. But when he checked the calendar, it was still November 16th. He assumed it was a system error. He went back to the radio. For the next hour, nothing happened. Just static. The same layered noise that seemed to shift subtly, as if responding to something unseen. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m. the following night, the voice returned. This time, it was louder. More urgent. Please, someone, he's outside. There was a sound in the background. A slow, rhythmic tapping, like something brushing against a wooden surface. Imran felt a tightness in his chest as he listened. He did not understand why, but the voice unsettled him in a way that no ordinary recording ever had. He tried to speak into the radio. "Who is this?" There was no response. Only the tapping, growing slightly faster. Then silence. The signal vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Imran checked the time again. 2:14 a.m. He rewound the tape and listened again, carefully this time. The details became clearer with each playback. The voice belonged to a woman. Young. Frightened. Breathing heavily between words. And then, something he had missed before. A second sound. Faint, almost hidden beneath the static. Footsteps. Not inside the room. Outside. The next morning, Imran searched local news reports. He didn't expect to find anything. It was a vague recording. No location. No names. Just a voice and a warning. But as he scrolled through the headlines, his attention stopped on a small article published less than an hour earlier. Woman found dead in apartment after reported disturbance. The time of the incident was listed as approximately 2:13 a.m. Imran felt a cold sensation move through his body. He opened the article. The details were limited. Authorities had responded to a call from neighbors who reported unusual noises coming from the victim's apartment. By the time they arrived, it was too late. There were no signs of forced entry. No suspect had been identified. Imran stared at the screen, his mind struggling to connect the information. The voice on the recording, the time of the incident, they matched. Exactly. He played the tape again, his hands trembling slightly. This time he listened for something else. Anything that could explain it. But the recording offered no answers. Only the same voice, the same fear, and the same final silence. He began to document everything more carefully. Every night, he tuned the radio at exactly 2:13 a.m. Every night, he recorded whatever came through. For several days, there was nothing. Then, on November 21st, the signal returned. This time it was different. There was no whispering, no pleading, just a calm, steady voice. A man. Time of entry, 2:13 a.m. Rear door is unlocked. Imran felt his throat tighten. The voice continued. No witnesses. No cameras. Quick and clean. There was a pause. Then a sound that Imran would later describe in his notes as a soft metallic click. The recording ended. Imran did not sleep that night. He spent hours replaying the audio, analyzing every detail. The voice was clear, deliberate. Not distorted by panic like the previous recording. This was someone speaking with purpose, planning something. The next day, he checked the news again. Nothing. No reports of any incident matching the description. At first, he felt a sense of relief. Maybe it was just a fragment of some unrelated transmission. Something old. Something already happened. But the timestamp on the tape said otherwise. November 21st. 2:13 a.m. The same pattern. That night, Imran sat in front of the radio long before the time approached. He adjusted the dials carefully, trying to isolate the signal. The static shifted as he moved the knobs, forming brief patterns that almost sounded like words, but never fully resolved. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the voice returned. But it was not the same. It was the woman again. Her voice was weaker now. Strained. He's still here. Imran's heart began to race. That made no sense. The woman from the first recording was dead. The news report had confirmed it. Yet the voice continued. I can hear him breathing. There was a long pause. Then a new sound. A door creaking open. Imran leaned closer to the speaker, his breath held. The woman spoke again, barely audible. Please, I didn't. The recording cut abruptly. Imran stared at the radio, his mind spinning. This was not possible. The timeline didn't align. The voices overlapped. Events that should have been separated were now intertwined in a way that defied logic. He checked the tape. The timestamp read November 22nd, 2:13 a.m. The next day, a second news report appeared. Another victim. Same neighborhood. Same time. No signs of forced entry. Imran felt something shift inside him. This was no longer a coincidence. The radio wasn't picking up random transmissions. It was broadcasting something else. Something that had not happened yet. Or perhaps something that was happening somewhere beyond his understanding of time. He began to listen more closely to the details. The voices, the sounds, the patterns. And then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the background of the latest recording, beneath the woman's voice, there was a faint, almost imperceptible noise. A low, steady hum. It was familiar. Too familiar. Imran turned slowly, his eyes moving across the room. The hum wasn't just on the recording. It was in the apartment, coming from the radio itself. But there was something else. Something hidden within the hum. A shape. A rhythm. Almost like breathing. He leaned closer, his ear inches from the speaker. The sound grew clearer. And then, for a brief moment, the static shifted. The hum broke, and a voice emerged. Not from the recording, not from the tape, but directly from the radio. Speaking in real time. Soft. Measured. And unmistakably aware. "You're listening now." Imran did not move. The voice did not repeat itself. It did not grow louder or clearer. It simply remained there, faint but present, as if it had always been part of the signal and had only just chosen to be heard. The radio surface vibrated lightly beneath his hand. He pulled back slowly, his breath shallow, his thoughts unraveling in silence. For the first time since the recordings began, he did not reach for the cassette player. He did not try to document it. Because this had not been a recording. It had responded to him. The room felt different. Witnesses later described Imran's apartment as unusually cold when authorities entered it days later. But at that moment, the temperature drop was subtle. Just enough to be noticed. Just enough to make the skin along his arms tighten. The radio remained still. No more voices came through. Only the layered static, shifting endlessly between frequencies that did not exist. Imran forced himself to step away. He told himself it was exhaustion. Lack of sleep. His mind was creating patterns, filling silence, with meaning that wasn't there. But deep down, something had already changed. He could no longer convince himself that the radio was passive. It was not receiving. It was choosing. That night, he did something he had not done before. He turned the radio off. The silence that followed should have been comforting. But it wasn't, because the hum did not stop. It lingered in the air, faint but constant, like an echo that refused to fade. Imran checked the power cord. Unplugged. He moved the radio across the room. The sound followed, not from the device, from the walls, from the space itself. He slept very little that night. According to his final notebook entries, this was the point where his recordings began to change. Not in quality, but in intent. He stopped documenting the voices as unknown signals. He began addressing them directly. The following entry was written at 1:58 a.m., November 23rd. "I will attempt communication again. The response suggests awareness, possibly reactive to observation. I need to determine if it can perceive more than sound." At exactly 2:13 a.m., the radio turned on by itself. Imran had left it unplugged. The dial illuminated with a faint, dull glow, far weaker than before, as if the light was not coming from the internal circuitry, but from somewhere deeper inside the device. The static returned immediately. But this time, it did not fluctuate. It held steady, waiting. Imran approached cautiously. His voice was controlled, but there was a tremor beneath it. "Can you hear me?" For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the static shifted. A voice emerged. Not distorted. Not faint. Clear. "Yes." Imran's throat tightened. He had prepared questions, written carefully in his notebook. But now, standing in front of the radio, he could not remember them. He forced himself to continue. "What is this? What am I hearing?" A pause followed, long enough to feel deliberate. Then, "What hasn't happened yet?" Imran felt a sharp pressure behind his eyes. "That's not possible," he said quietly. Another pause. Then the voice responded, unchanged in tone. "It is happening. You are early." The room seemed to contract around him. Imran glanced at the clock. 2:14 a.m. The radio had never continued past that minute. Yet the voice remained, uninterrupted. "Who are you?" he asked. The static deepened, as if layers were being added to it, folding over one another. Then, "I am listening." The answer made no sense. Imran shook his head.
No.
"You're speaking. You're." "I am listening," the voice repeated. This time, there was something different beneath the words. Not emotion, not emphasis. Something else. Something that felt closer. Imran stepped back. The air in the room felt heavier now, pressing against his chest with each breath. He looked down at his notebook, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through the pages. The previous recordings, the voices, the crimes, they all shared one constant.
The time.
2:13 a.m. He looked back at the radio. "Why that time?" he asked. The static crackled. Then the voice answered. "That is when it begins." Imran felt a chill move through him. What begins? There was no immediate response. Instead, the static shifted again, forming patterns that almost resembled overlapping voices, too faint to distinguish individually. Then slowly they began to align, one by one, layer by layer, until a single phrase emerged from the noise. "He arrives." Imran's pulse quickened. Who arrives? Silence. Then, without warning, the radio emitted a sharp burst of sound. Not static. Not a voice. A scream. It lasted less than a second. But it was enough. Imran stumbled back, knocking over a stack of tapes as he did. The radio went silent again, the faint glow of the dial fading until the room was left in darkness. The clock read 2:15 a.m. For the first time, the signal had extended beyond its usual boundary. Imran did not approach the radio again that night. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at the device from a distance, as if it might move if he looked away. The next day, there was another report. Another victim.
Same time.
Same pattern. But this time, there was a witness. A neighbor who had seen something in the hallway moments before the incident. According to the report, the witness described a man standing near the victim's door. He was not attempting to hide. He was not forcing entry. He was simply waiting. When asked for further details, the witness hesitated, then said something that investigators initially dismissed as confusion. "He was listening," the witness said. "Not to anything I could hear. Just standing there, like he was waiting for something to finish." Imran read that line over and over again. Then he turned to his notebook and wrote a single sentence. "It doesn't just predict. It coordinates." That night, he did not wait until 2:13. He began listening early. The radio remained silent for hours, its surface cold and unresponsive. But the hum in the apartment had grown stronger. It was no longer subtle. It pulsed through the walls in slow, steady intervals, like a heartbeat. At 2:12 a.m., the radio turned on. No delay. No static buildup. Just immediate sound. Voices.
Dozens of them.
Overlapping. Whispering. Some pleading. Some calm. Some laughing. Imran covered his ears instinctively, but the sound did not diminish. It wasn't just coming from the radio anymore. It was everywhere. Inside the room. Inside his head. Then, abruptly, the voices stopped, replaced by a single, steady tone. And a familiar voice. "You are still listening." Imran's hands trembled as he lowered them. "What do you want?" he asked. The response came instantly. "To continue." The tone shifted slightly, deepening in a way that felt almost physical. "To complete what you started." Imran's mind raced. "I didn't start anything."
A pause.
Then, "You repaired it." The words settled heavily in the air. Imran looked at the radio. The wires. The connections he had restored. "You're saying this was broken?"
No.
The answer came with a subtle distortion, as if the signal itself was resisting the word. It was closed. Imran felt a sudden wave of nausea. And now, silence. Then, quietly, "It is open." The room fell still. Even the hum seemed to fade for a moment. Imran swallowed hard. What happens at 2:13? This time, the pause was longer. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Long enough for him to consider turning away. But then the voice returned. Closer than before. "Listen." The clock changed. 2:13 a.m. And somewhere inside the radio, something shifted. Not a sound. Not a voice. A presence. Imran felt it immediately. A pressure in the room, subtle but undeniable, as if the space itself had been altered. The static did not return. Instead, there was a new sound.
Soft.
Measured. Footsteps. Not on a recording. Not distant. Inside the apartment. Imran's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly toward the hallway. The darkness there seemed deeper than it should have been, stretching further than the physical space allowed. The footsteps continued, one at a time, unhurried, approaching. Imran backed away, his body pressed against the wall as his eyes locked onto the hallway entrance. "Stop," he whispered. The footsteps did not stop. The radio remained silent. Watching, listening. The distance between each step grew shorter, closer, until they stopped. Just beyond the edge of the light, Imran could not see anything, but he knew something was there, waiting. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. And then, from the darkness, a voice spoke. Not through the radio, not through the static.
Directly. Clear.
Measured. The same voice from the transmissions. "You open the door."